Good morning and welcome to Rising. We have a great show for you today. Briahna is here with me. Don't usually see you on Mondays. Nice to have you with us.
It's a more pleasant start to the week than I usually have, Robby. It's a real pleasure to be here with you.
Wonderful. Well, let's get right into it.
Well, National Security Council spokesman John Kirby claimed that the Seymour Hersh story alleging the U.S. blew up the Nord Stream pipeline is not true. Let's take a listen.
The administration has been clear in its denials that there was any U.S. involvement in the Nord Stream pipelines. Seymour Hersh has this long piece out saying he's citing a single anonymous source who talks about what was going on and what he claims led to us being involved in that. He says prior to Putin's invasion of Ukraine back in December, a working group was put together, and he says this. What became clear to the participants, according to the source with direct knowledge of the process, is that Sullivan, meaning Jake Sullivan, intended for the group to come up with a plan for the destruction of the two Nord Stream pipelines, and that he was delivering on the desires of the president. Hersh points back to the president saying this in February of last year with the German chancellor.
There will be no longer a Nord Stream 2. We will bring an end to it. We will... I promise you we'll be able to do it.
Can you say unequivocally the U.S., no U.S. proxy, no one connected to the U.S. had anything to do? I mean, is the Seymour Hersh complete fabrication, that article?
It's a completely false story. There is no truth to it, Shannon, not a shred of it. It is not true. The United States and no proxies from the United States had anything to do with that. Nothing.
If the U.S. were to undertake some mission like that, would the administration have an obligation to inform Congress in advance?
We did not take any such operation, Shannon. And obviously we keep Congress informed appropriately of things, both classified and unclassified, but I can tell you now, regardless of the notification process, there was no U.S. involvement in this. None. Zero. It's completely false.
So, look, that is an unequivocal denial of involvement.
It's an unequivocal denial of the involvement, but he completely sidestepped her second question. She asked, if the U.S. were involved in an operation like this, would there be an obligation to disclose it to Congress? And he said, well, there wasn't an operation like this.
But then I think he said there was an operation, and then yes, I took his answer to be yes.
I did not hear...
He said we inform Congress about...
No, he said we inform Congress about stuff. But he did not say that we would have had an obligation to let Congress know if the U.S. were involved in an operation like this. And that's important because some of the details in Seymour Hersh's report were about how the team of divers that was selected to implement this mission were specifically selected because they were from a group that evaded some of the notification requirements that might have existed if certain other Navy divers were involved.
That was in the
plan.
Substack. That Ian Bremmer piece I referenced said that disagreed with that analysis and said even the team that Cy Hersh claimed was used would require congressional notification, and he just said they would do congressional notification for things both classified and not classified. So now, he could be lying. That could just be a flat out lie. But it's a pretty bald-faced lie if it is. Well, which maybe it is.
But that second question, which again, I do not believe he answered, is core to this because it completely undermines the first question. If there is no accountability mechanism and if there is no obligation for there to be any reporting to Congress about operations like this, then he is frankly allowed to lie in answering the first question, which is, did this even happen?
I don't think under any circumstances he's allowed to lie to the press about what happened. He has to decline to comment about it. I mean, look, maybe he's lying, and again, everyone, if this turns out to be the case, and we should investigate it, we have to get to the bottom of who did this. If it's our government, everyone involved in this lie should be held criminally liable for an unconstitutional, flagrant abuse of government power without any oversight, with an act of war against an ally, without consultation, without informing Congress. That is absolutely unacceptable, and we need to get to the bottom of whether it happened or not.
Well, to the question of how to get to the bottom of it, one interesting thing that happened last week was that the same activist who we've covered going up to confronting AOC, Jamal Bowman, a number of progressives, over specifically the issue of the war in Ukraine, ended up confronting New York Congressmember Richie Torres last week and basically asked him point blank if he were willing to have any kind of congressional investigation into the Cy Hersh story. Let's take a look.
Cy Hersh just released the fact that the United States blew up the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. You weren't briefed on that. Why not? Are you going to put a congressional probe into that? Yes or no? Because this ain't no ordinary journalist. You know that.
So,
Oh, I want to hear what he has to say.
Nord Stream is a pipeline that transfers oil from Europe, particularly Germany. I'm sorry, from Russia to Germany. So we don't have the authority to investigate pipelines.
All right, come on. Now that's you know that. Victoria Nuland herself says she's happy that it's a pile of metal underwater. Do you share her sentiment?
Here's what we know. The Europeans are conducting an investigation.
They investigated.
And it is true.
Why did Joe Biden say that we are going to get rid of the Nord Stream pipeline? And when asked, but wait a minute, that's run by Gazprom in Germany, how are you going to do it? He said,
We'll be able to do it.
If you have definitive evidence.
Yeah, we do. It's called Seymour Hersh.
All right, so that's as clear a question as you can get. Frankly, it wasn't about I'm blaming you for anything. It was just saying you're a Congress member. Are you going to investigate this? Are you going to launch a probe to investigate it? Richie Torres' answer is, well, Europeans have investigated it. Well, they did investigate it, and they found no evidence that it was Russia, which was the story that was first floated in the media for who was responsible. And everyone seems to have kind of thrown their hands up in the air and said, well, who could know? Who could know who did this? And so obviously what that protester, Jose Vega, was asking was whether or not we, as the United States, should investigate our own involvement. Not what happened on the other side of the world per se, but what we actually might have firsthand knowledge of because we potentially did do it. And it seemed not only like Richie Torres was unwilling to commit to that, but maybe like he wasn't potentially knowledgeable about what had been going on in this to begin with.
And it would be the easiest thing in the world to say, yes, we should investigate that.
Yes.
Because we should.
Yes.
We should investigate whether the U.S. was involved, given exactly the comments that Biden and Victoria Nuland made that are mysterious and somewhat sinister about what was going to happen. Again, given that and given the reporting and given the U.S.'s history of doing exactly things like this, it is absolutely a matter for investigation. And the apparent fact that no one was, like, this wasn't a covert operation that went through the, Congress being informed, et cetera. So it's a major scandal if we did this, and that's an absolutely appropriate thing for Congress to investigate. Remember when Congress and the executive branch had an adversarial relationship? That when Congress had some, I'm talking in the distant past now, like at our founding, when there was some understanding that Congress would be in charge and the executive branch would merely carry out the policies enacted by Congress. We are so far from that. And now they're obedient lapdogs, unless they're controlled by the opposite party.
And even more terrifying, it does seem like Richie Torres, who's been spending a lot of time recently dunking on the George Santos story, hasn't necessarily carved out enough time in his day to really be briefed on what this is.
Maybe if George Santos claimed he blew up the Nord Stream pipeline, Richie Torres would be interested in investigating it.
I think that's probably true. And look, here's the last thing. Republicans, now that they have control of the House, have said that they have intentions of investigating them any number of things. Hunter laptop related, we had the Twitter files hearings. I think that this could be an area, given that there is this anti-war energy in the party, to actually conduct an investigation that I think would inure enormously to the benefit of the American people and start to, frankly, get some real plaudits from the left.
I like the statement Senator Mike Lee made about this, that these are troubling accusations, cannot be dismissed out of hand. In an ideal world, they should be able to be dismissed out of hand because the U.S. should never be involved in something like this. But you can't dismiss them out of hand, and they need to be looked at much further. Yeah,
well, we should watch a little bit more of this confrontation with Richie Torres. Let's take a look.
Then produce the evidence.
He already
You
did.
produced the evidence.
Read
the article.
Listen, this is Seymour Hersh. This is the My Lai massacre. Okay, this is a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist. He is not going to publish something he can't prove. So unless you're naive enough and you don't know that, I'm here to inform you. I'm at least asking for congressional inquiry into whether or not it's true, because his credibility alone should prompt that, don't you think?
The Europeans are conducting an investigation.
We know the United States did this.
It seems like you know the answer to the question, so there's no need to.
Well, what are you gonna do? I'm your
Answer
constituent.
your question.
I'm your constituent. I want you to actually do something about it.
Now, of course, journalists make mistakes. It's not true that because this article was written it is in fact true that the United States did this. However, I take his point that I do think that the detail of it, the credibility of the journalist, for me, does provoke the necessity of some kind of investigation. And I found Richie Torres' response there lacking.
Yes, the combination of the article by this very well-regarded journalist who's done terrific investigative work and the statements by Biden and his people on that suggesting we would do something about Nord Stream. To me, that is a absolute basis to have an inquiry. Again, it's not the final word on the subject. As I've said, I respect Cy Hersh and the work he's done. I cannot. It's not dispositive for me. An article with a single anonymous source.
Right.
But we should certainly look at it more.
Yeah, and it's worth noting Richie Torres clipped this moment into a response on Twitter saying my town hall was hijacked by pro-Putin propagandists who blame the U.S. rather than Vladimir Putin for Putin's war of aggression against Ukraine. It's tragic to see useful idiots whitewashing Putin's war crimes. I stand with the Ukrainian people and their fight for freedom.
Like, you can't, even if it doesn't, that's a shoot the messenger kind of, say you don't agree with the politics of the messenger, whatever. The inquiry, the questions he was asking are totally valid and ones that everyone, no matter how pro-Ukrainian you are, how much you want to continue the war, no matter what your politics are, you should care if your government is lying to you.
Yep.
And we know they've done it before.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, we did reach out to Cy Hersh for comment, and we're hoping to have him on the show very soon, so stay tuned for that. And coming up next, I'll tell you what's on my radar.